what your choices have been, and what karmic timelines and contracts you have journeyed. The light is calling for the reunification of all aspects of life in this realm now. It is calling for the cleansing of all polarities. It is calling for the rising of all sacred heart centers now. All are being summoned home to the greater light now. Hi, and welcome to Whole Soul Mastery's Live Well, Live Whole podcast series, where we focus on mind, body, spirit, wellness, fitness, and wholeness, and integrating polarity within so that we can access higher states of light and unity consciousness. I'm Marie Mohler, and I'm an author, intuitive, and a host of the Whole Soul Mastery podcast series. And I'm here today with Dr. Wim Hordijk, who, in his own words, is a computer scientist by training, an evolutionist by historical accident, an academic against better judgment, and a professional wanderer by choice. I love that. He is an independent scientist consultant with a degree in computer science. However, most of his work is on the interface of computation and biology and focusing on emergence, evolution, and origin of life. For about 20 years now, he has been working, living, and traveling all over the world. He has a blog and a Twitter account where he shares some of his stories about science, his work, and his travels. So thank you, Wim. I'm so glad you're joining me today, and we're having this opportunity to have this connection. Welcome.
Well, thank you for the invitation.
I am somebody who's not very traveled. I travel in other ways. I travel through intuition and in metaphysics and, with spirit, but I actually have not traveled much in my life. And so I'm always fascinated by people who have seen so much of the world. And we connected through the nonprofit, through Whole Soul School and Foundation. I'm a co-founder of that. And I saw your work, your photography, your nature photography. You take pictures of everywhere that you go. And you actually wrote a little, blog post for our nonprofit talking about the beauty and science of nature. And I just wanted to read a little bit of that to seed our conversation and invite our listeners into what we're going to be talking about today. But, you wrote this: in our increasingly urbanized world, we have largely lost our connection with nature. In fact, humanity as a whole is doing a pretty good job at messing up our natural world. This has led to all kinds of problems, both environmentally and socially. Although we do have the know-how to turn things around, scientific and technological solutions alone, no matter how important, are not sufficient. We will not get to the root of the problems unless we change our own attitude towards nature. To stimulate a reconnection with our natural world, your new Beauty and Science of Nature article series combines engaging popular science stories with eye-catching personal nature photographs. The aim of these articles is to foster an increased appreciation for and a better understanding of our natural world in an entertaining, inspiring, and educational way. And that is what you have continued to do, really, as you continue in your travels. You spend an amazing time in nature, and you found a way to marry those two worlds, haven't you? That connection with nature and also being a scientist. That's pretty huge in our world today. Can you talk about that a little bit? How you found your way? Have you always been connected to nature, or did you find that you disconnected and you had to find your way back?
I can't say I've always been connected with nature. So I grew up in the Netherlands. As you probably know, the Netherlands is a very small country with a lot of people. I mean, in absolute number, not so much maybe, but in terms of population density, it's actually, I think it still is the most densely populated country in Europe. So it's very urbanized, it's very artificial. I even read somewhere that only about 2% of the original nature is still left in the Netherlands.
Wow.
That doesn't mean there's no nature at all. I mean, it's actually very green, uh, but it's all kind of cultivated nature.
Uh-huh.
So there's very little really original nature as it was. Um, so growing up there, I can't say I really had a big connection with nature. It's not that I was disconnected either. I liked it, but I just didn't really have much of an opportunity to really spend a lot of time in nature and to feel that connection.
Yeah.
Uh, I have always been interested in science. Even as a little kid, I was already reading about all kinds of things. And um, according to my parents, even when I was 6 years old or something, I already said. Apparently, I said that I wanted to be a professor or something.
Wow.
Um, so yeah, that's something that I've always been pretty sure about, that I wanted to go into science. Uh, so after I graduated from college, I was kind of looking around for doing a PhD and really getting into science. And somehow I ended up doing that in New Mexico, in the southwest of the US.
Mm.
And as you probably know, that is just a spectacular area in terms of nature.
Mm.
Um, I still think it's one of the most wonderful places in the entire world.
Wow.
So I ended up there not because of that. I went there because of a particular research institute that I really wanted to go to, and it just happened to be in Santa Fe in New Mexico. And to be honest, I didn't know anything about New Mexico. So I end up there, as somebody freshly graduated from college, and I just end up in this amazing place.
Mm.
So that's really where I developed my love for nature, and I started doing a lot of hiking and mountain biking, and just spending time out in nature, and that's when I realized that it became sort of an additional love in my life next to the science. Learning about nature in terms of how does it work, and how can we understand it. And yeah, from that point on, I kind of tried to combine that with my own experience of nature. So that's kind of how it developed.
Well, it's amazing because, I'd invite our listeners to we'll share your website at the end of the podcast and also your Twitter handle so that people can find your work. But, as people can see in a lot of my podcasts, I'm in my studio and my kids growing up and they homeschooled for a number of years. They are nature photographers, and because they were homeschooled, they had time, just like you had time. You were in graduate school, and here you are in the Southwest, and all that natural beauty was all around you, and all you had to do was say yes. Right? You just had to say yes, and go and start the process of having experiences and reconnecting at that level. And I think that's exactly what my kids did, is that they had a lot of time because we homeschooled for a while. And a good friend of ours actually put a camera in their hands, and she was a nature photographer, and they saw some of her pictures, and they didn't have any tutelage whatsoever. They had time and interest and a little bit of a passion, and they got up close and personal with flowers and plants and animals and creatures and everything, really. And I saw it blossom in all of my kids. It was amazing. And some of these photos, they're all around this room, but I think that really deeply impacted them at a critical time of their development too, because it was something that they grew up with, which this was something that you were rediscovering in a way, or it activated inside you in your experience in graduate school. But nature is always, inviting us to, I feel that as a channel, as an intuitive, um, I became very connected and always empathic, but I became much more connected and aware of the living universe and aware of the conscious universe around me. And so I can feel trees. When
Mm.
I live in a very forest like area. I'm in North Carolina, so a lot of trees and woods. And we have so much, it's like brimming with life. There's all kinds of creatures. I've been talking about chiggers in some of my messages and marinades for my blog posts, and then we have a deer family that generations and generations and generations of them have grown up practically in my yard. So I know all the
Oh,
siblings and the cousins, and we even had a white deer born this last year. I think it was actually two deer. I think it was twins. And it's amazing. I don't remember the deer doing this before previously, but they had a wisdom to split the twins, maybe because they stood out, right? And maybe were more vulnerable to predators.
mm,
So after they were, a few weeks old, I never saw the twins together again. They got paired. They split up another set of twins, and then they created two sets of twins. The regular brown deer and the white deer, and then he ended up being a he, and the male deer don't stick around after a year or so. They're run off, and they find their own tribe. So but he was beautiful, absolutely
mm.
gorgeous. And so that's my world of living connected in this synergy with nature, and that we are all part of this greater picture, this greater oneness. And it was a joy in many ways to see my kids grow up connected with that. They're busy in their lives, right? They're in college, but I also know that inside them there is all an appreciation for nature. But our culture, it depends, like where you live. That's interesting how that was what catalyzed some of your connection, because some people growing up in a more urban environment, right? It's almost like there needs to be an invitation or some kind of catalyzing experience. Otherwise, you grow up without it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's kind of what I meant earlier, that when I grew up, I just didn't really have the opportunities. Uh, and the kind of nature that I got to see was, the flowers in our backyard and the neighbor's cat. Um, and then, we would go on family holidays, 2 weeks in the summer, maybe, go to the mountains somewhere in Austria or something. But yeah, that just wasn't the same. And I only in when I look back at it, I know I always had it in me, but I just didn't have the opportunities to let it come out, and that really only happens after I moved to Santa Fe.
Yeah. And you could choose it. That's the thing. You could choose to have more experiences. I wanted to point out that one of the articles that you wrote, that you referenced in the post we had on Whole Soul School and Foundation, was when people saw the Avatar movie, right? I always say with the blue people, but it was the Navi, right? And they lived on a planet Pandora, and for many people that was another kind of awakening or wake up call. I think it aroused a lot of emotions in different people. And you saw that some audiences were actually depressed because of that movie, because of the stark contrast between what they saw that's possible, and looking around us and what we're presently living, right? Yeah, do you want to speak to that
Yeah,
a little bit? Yeah.
yeah. The funny thing about that movie is, initially I had no interest in going to see it when it came out. Um, I'm personally, I'm not really a big fan of science fiction movies,
Mm.
and so my well, it wasn't even an opinion. My expectation was that it was just going to be, yet another science fiction movie that we have already seen so many of. But somehow a friend of mine convinced me to go see it anyway, and obviously I was blown away by it, like most people. It was not at all what I expected. And then later on, I read that news article about people apparently being depressed after seeing that movie. Um, Not because they didn't like the movie, but because they like it so much that they actually wanted to live in a world like Pandora.
Right.
Um, so yeah, that kind of tells you how disconnected we are. So in that little article that I wrote, I actually um, I used it as an example that uh, it's kind of funny that people get depressed after seeing that movie, because then they realize how disconnected they are with nature, or they feel that they're missing something. But we actually do have a lot of beautiful nature around us. you just have to make a little bit of an effort to to go out and find it and enjoy it. But
Yeah.
um, so I use that as kind of this contrast that it really has to be uh, it really has to be kind of shown to us forcefully
Mm,
that we have this disconnect with nature, and only then we start thinking about it.
mm.
But then, of course, it's up to us to say, okay, there are opportunities to see things and experience things like that.
Yeah, and I find that when we say yes and we give ourselves permission to choose, to pay more attention, to appreciate nature, right? To really connect with it at some level. Um, it is a whole world does open to us. It's like, the Pandora planet unfolds and opens its flowers to us. And it's like we realize that there is a universal language inside us that doesn't even need words. There's a oneness in nature that if you get quiet enough to listen, you can hear it, and you can hear it speaking to you. And I think that is a huge part of, there's so many things we can talk about, but in the disconnection from nature, disconnection from where our food comes from, disconnection from art and music and things that, really engage our spirit, right? That all has been sort of cut out of our lives in many ways. And then you get into places. I had no idea about the Netherlands being so densely populated and much more urban, in some ways. But I think I've been fortunate that somehow my family growing up always was. We're either on a farm or in the mountains or
Mhm.
at the beach whenever there was a holiday time. And so I grew up, and I think I was just such a little empathic child. I was such a little star being. I was so connected to all of those things, and for a while thought I was going to be a veterinarian. I think many kids who grow up loving animals think, "Oh, that's what I'll do. I'll be a vet,"
Yeah.
not knowing that there's so many ways to love animals and to connect with them. And so it's always been a part of my life. But truly, for people who might be listening to this and feel that disconnect, it's amazing just what saying yes, it's saying, I'm going to tune into that. The next time I go for a bike ride or the next time I take the dog for a walk, I'm going to pay a little more attention. I'm going to be willing to allow a kind of presence or a stillness to like actually listen to the birds. A lot of people are so busy in their lives they don't even see or really hear nature. I just wanted to share one story that happened to me when my kids were in preschool. It's actually on the cover of one of my books called Cosmic Wealth. There's a hawk on the cover, and he's sitting on a cross. Actually, my kids were in a preschool that was in a church building, and my kids have been going there for years. But one day I went there, and there was this huge red-tailed hawk perched on top of the cross at the top of the church, and I was so just it was breathtaking or breath giving. It was so beautiful. And I stood there and I was marveling at it. And then I got my kids into their preschool and got them all settled. And I came back out and it was still there. And I was just like take soaking in that moment and thinking, of course, I wish I had my camera. And that was back when I probably had a flip phone. So I didn't have a phone in my camera. And I was like, oh, well, I'll go get my camera. And if it's here 3 hours from now, when I come back to get my kids by some miracle, I'll take its picture. And no one noticed this amazing, majestic being. No one, not one parent looked up. They were so busy, like parents
Mm.
are, getting their kids out of the car safely into school. And I came back and that hawk was still there. Either it had left and come back to meet with me again, or it had stayed up there. It was miraculous. And it
Wow.
stayed there. And I spent another half an hour taking its picture. And then it flew over to a bench and I got a picture. I think that's on the back of my book, actually. And he was gripping the bench and you could really see his talons, which were amazing. And hawk medicine is all about tearing, clarity of sight and tearing away the illusions that block our clarity of sight. And I was just having this mystical, magical experience at one point when I was still taking pictures and he was up on the cross. And I said to a parent who came to pick up their kids and they were hustling and bustling and, just doing the daily thing that people do. And I said, look, isn't that amazing? They're like, oh, that's so creepy. And they went on, and it's amazing the different responses. Number one, there were so many parents who just didn't see because they
Mm.
were so busy being parents, they didn't see. And then when I pointed it out to some parents, that was kind of the response, like, "Ooh, that's eerie." Um, and I myself felt it was so beautiful, and I had this beautiful exchange and this whole communication in a way. And then I connected deeper ever since that day with hawk medicine. I knew he was my totem. That's one of my totem animals. I don't know if you get into any of that, but we'll talk about that. But I was forever touched, and I have him on the cover of my book because in the book I'm talking about this deeper connection with ourselves, this cosmic wealth and the riches that live inside us, and they're all around us in nature, and it's free. Like nature is right there, and I think it's a journey. It is a journey sometimes to give ourselves permission to take that extra minute. It's amazing with that extra minute, just a minute or 5 minutes in nature where you're breathing, you just, slow down your breathing and you allow yourself this moment of grace. And it doesn't have to be for people listening. Some people might have a hugely spiritual experience, and some people might just experience a moment of stillness and grace. And the purity of that you can experience standing in front of the ocean, being in the mountains somewhere, connecting with a flower. It's amazing. I watched it in all of my kids. I've seen it in my own life, and you clearly have been touched by that. I see it in the pictures that you take and that you share in your websites. You offer that experience you were having to your listeners, to your audience, to the world who tunes in.
Yeah, that's for me. That's kind of the idea behind it.
Yeah.
The pictures is only is a more recent thing. Only the last several years that I started doing that. Actually, initially, I was never interested in taking pictures. Um, I remember I did buy. Gosh, this is probably 20 years ago. I did buy one of the first affordable digital cameras that had just come out around, yeah, around 2000. Um, just because I wanted to try it and I was interested in the technology and just see how it works. So for a while, I took my camera with me on my hiking trips, but very soon I left it at home again because what I noticed was that instead of enjoying,
Mm,
being out in nature, I was constantly looking for the perfect picture.
right.
So I actually found it more of a distraction. So then again, for many years, I had no interest in taking pictures. And then, of course, smartphones with cameras came on the market. So when I had my first smartphone, I thought, okay, since I have a camera in my pocket anyway, let's just start making a few pictures of my hiking trips. Yeah, just with the idea of kind of illustrating it, just to try to convey the beauty of the places that I like to visit. And then I actually started getting more interested in it. And then at some point, I bought a real camera and got more and more into it. So yeah, right now, for me the main thing is really even though I still feel like it's impossible to really capture the real thing, the real feeling that comes with it.
Right.
But I do enjoy the process of trying to capture something of it in a way that is not just a picture of no, look where I've been, but really trying to put something of your own experience into those pictures. So
There's so many ways to, I don't know, share the things that we love, share our passions, and communicate and tell stories with other people. And obviously, I think pictures do an amazing job. Each one of these photos behind me, and the ones that I've seen and enjoy of other people, they beautifully tell a story. Interestingly, I'm a writer. I'm a scribe. I'm a channel, and so I communicate in writing and then in speaking in these podcasts. I cannot take a picture. There's something about it. I don't know. I just fumble with the technology, or it puts like maybe a barrier. I kind of feel like between me and what I'm connecting with, something doesn't really sync up.
mm,
But and then there are people who just capture the most beautiful energies, and some people like me. I started this podcast saying I'm not a world traveler, And maybe I think that I feel a call to travel more in the future. But to date, I've not been a big world traveler. So when I can drink in the pictures and the stories of other people, and a picture says 1,000 words, really, it does invite you into the experience. And I think people, whether you feel you identify as an intuitive, or just somebody who's engaged in the world, we can really tap into the emotion of what's happening in the pictures that you share. We can literally be there in that moment or in that environment if we journey into the picture. There's a book I started writing years ago that I never finished, but my character fell into an art canvas, I think it was, in an old attic, and then his grandchildren stumble along and figure out that whatever they draw on the canvas becomes a tool that they can take into that world with them. And never finished it. It needs to be. It's a story that should be finished, but
Yeah.
it's like the photos. It's like we can, it's like can be a portal. It's a portal into an experience that you were having, and in the oneness we can connect with that. And even in this picture, like, I love having the raccoon behind me. He also is like an escort. He's almost saying, come on, come on, come with me. It's so fun. We'll travel into some worlds together. And I think, going back to the Avatar movie, I think that movie, when you didn't have any expectations of it, it really was almost like I would say, a multidimensional portal. It, like, took us into a place of feeling. All humanity that saw that movie on some level, whether you thought it was spiritual, whether you felt the multidimensionality, or you just felt deeply moved or disturbed or something by it, it really moved us inside. And I think those worlds are very possible in our world. I think that's the world, a kind of world like that is trying to reactivate inside us, where we are connected. I remember the characters in that film, the blue people, saying one of their greetings, or how they connected, I think, their tails together or something. But I think the greeting was, I feel you. Like, I feel you. I know you because I feel you, right? It
Mm.
was a greeting, and it was such the essence of what sentience is, which is clear feeling. It's feeling each other to know each other. And I feel pictures like this, and I feel artwork like that. And when people are really expressing themselves and their passions in their work, many people listening to this have been moved by experiences like that. And that's a sign that, like, to me, that's a communication from the universe. Yes, it is a living, breathing, moving, conscious universe. And I think the other side of that movie is the contrast of what we see in our lives, where we have all these devices and we're so distracted, and
Mhm.
have very little downtime. And if we have downtime, a lot of people, it terrifies them. They don't know what to do with downtime, right? So they make sure they get busy really quickly. They fill that
Yeah.
space. And you seem to be somebody that maybe always had a little predisposition to, I don't know, valuing time, listening somehow inside. You seem like you listen. Would you say that you've been a listener in some way
Yeah.
in your life?
Uh, um, yeah. I was going to say I've maybe always had that. I'm not so sure. I've always been a very introvert person. That's for sure.
Mm,
Um,
yeah.
I'm more of an observer than a participant.
Mm,
I can definitely say that. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and in that sense, then the world nourishes you, because introverts, really can attune differently. I think we have a finer attunement to the details and things in our lives. I think I would identify, I was much more introverted as a kid, and I think I've come more into, maybe, like, if there was a personality test, I'd be a dot in the middle between an extrovert and an introvert. But I I drink in experiences, and I'm so much, it's only expanded in me, this awareness of the connection with all things. And there's such a blessing. And I would say that to people who identify as extroverts, which doesn't mean that extroverts aren't attuned. I think they are. It's a sense of kind of how we gather our energy, right? How we generate our energy. But I think extroverts even, or people who would even say that they just feel like they're on the go all the time. How could they possibly take a moment and spend a minute with a ladybug? Like they just don't have time for that, right? But it's amazing when we give ourselves time. There's so many versions of what meditation is to me anyway. And I think when I connect with the deer outside, or, um, I'm raking leaves or I'm washing dishes even, but I find these moments where I'm connecting with my spirit, and I'm attuning to something just deeper, whether it's the temperature of the water, or, appreciating my home, or the way the light shines in some of my windows, or there is this calling to connect at a deeper level. And this is kind of, I forget who wrote that book, but Man's Search for Meaning. Do you remember who wrote that book?
I don't know if I know that.
Yeah.
Mm.
I don't know if it was Joseph Campbell, but somebody who was really studying, human evolution, human behavior, and maybe the hero's journey. But I think we are seeking meaning. And when we don't have these still points, when we don't go out in nature and we don't just say, gosh, that flower is extraordinary, and how it bursts with life. It's amazing. And I find new things to marvel about all the time. Nature is just, it's amazing, the beauty and science of nature. And that's a lot of, I think, what you started to marry your worlds. You started to bring those two worlds together, integrate that integration of sharing some of the science behind some of the photography and the places that you visit, and sharing that with people. And of course, they can take in the beauty of it while they also learn to understand a little bit of the science and the context of where you were and what that experience was.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, to me that was actually I thought that was a nice combination. Um,
yeah,
Even though I didn't have that personal connection with nature so much when I grew up, I was always very interested in science
yeah,
and understanding more about the world, how everything works. And then I started combining those two things for myself, and that's also so at the beginning of this year I did start this article series on the beauty and science of nature, exactly combining those two things. Also with the idea that there's obviously there's a lot of stuff out there, um, you know, sort of popular science articles with beautiful photographs, but it's usually different people who write the article than the ones that take the photographs. So I thought it was actually nice to have both from the same person, which I think makes it more personal and kind of
yeah,
maybe a different way of connecting with it. Um, so I had this idea, and I still like it a lot. And I started at the beginning of this year, but then of course the whole thing happens in the spring with all the lockdowns and travel
right,
restrictions and everything. So there was just so much going on, and yeah, people just didn't really have any interest or time to look at other things. So
yeah,
I kind of decided to just stop that again.
yeah,
Um, Hopefully, there will be a good opportunity to start it up again at some point. But yeah, it just didn't seem the right time to be doing it. But there's a few articles out there.
it
So
is. And I think you're a voice and a messenger of that. And what is it, when the student is ready, the teacher appears? Like when we're ready for something, the materials and the resources always find their way to us. And our job is each to listen to the inspiration. And, if it calls to us and we can engage with it, we honor that and we bring that through, and it like touches other people's lives. That's also part of the, coming back to this kind of interconnectedness that we all are, and finding that balance. And when you were talking about the beauty and science of nature, which has been part of your messages, your story to tell humanity in the way that you do, I also really felt kind of the right and left brain coming together, the masculine and the feminine coming together again. And that's so much what we're working on right now, is a world in disharmony, and imbalance, and having to recognize that and pause for just a moment to admit to ourselves something's out of balance, right? So that we can allow that integration. And when you have articles like what you share and the images that you share, I feel it in the images behind me, and the work that my kids do, and the work that I do. It's sort of it is integrating polarity within. That's part of what whole soul mastery. That's what mastery is. It's bringing what seems like total opposites that are in opposing forces in a way into their natural synchronistic and synergistic harmony. And these terms of I've never even really looked it up, but sort of complementary opposites. But the guides gave me a term, dichotomous oneness. They said that to me years ago one time, and I still have to look up fully what dichotomous means. But I think if it has the energy of polarity, like two kind of opposites coming into one whole. And that's what the 0 point portal is in many ways. I feel the 0 point portal is an intuitive level. I don't know if you even can explain. I can't explain it at a scientific level, but whatever that 0 point is, it's kind of the place where all things meet, where they come together in a balance. And I think in this new energies of what the world we're moving into, that better world that is going to be unfolding as more of these waves of change usher in a greater light on the planet and a greater consciousness, we that polarity is it fuels the new world, but in a different way, in this greater density of kind of a 3D matrix that we've been living in. It does polarize, it does separate, it divides, we compete, all of the separation consciousness that we see all around the world. But when that those very same opposites, those polarities, can be valued from a wholeness vision perspective, from like that understanding of 0 point, they actually can fuel planets somehow. I don't really know, but I'm tapped into something. The guides continue to talk about that inside me. I don't know if there's something, if they're talking about that in quantum physics in any way, but there's this energy where the same thing that divides us in the realm that we've lived in for so long, the earth that we understand as being all that is, this new world that we're moving into, it's the thing that unites us and the thing that is regenerative and that powers our world in a way. And of course that brings in the feminine, which I would say in your title of your article, the beauty is the divine feminine, and the science somehow is, holding that space of the masculine energy somehow, and marrying those two and bringing the meaning back into people's lives. Any one of those things, all beauty, and I suppose no science, we might not have the discoveries that we do, right? And all science and no beauty, are all male, all all one of any one thing. It's not enough. It takes the balance. It takes that communication and that connection.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah, they're definitely complementary things in that sense. And yeah, that's also again the kind of the idea behind these articles is to stimulate people to find that balance and to look at both sides.
Yeah.
It also reminds me of an interesting thing that happened once several years ago. I gave a lecture to colleagues of mine. So I'm a computer scientist by training, but I've, as you said in the introduction, I've mostly done work in biology. I don't consider myself a biologist. I really mostly do computer modeling, but I work together a lot with biologists.
Mm.
So several years ago, I gave a lecture to some of my colleagues about sacred geometry
Oh, wow.
and how everything in nature is basically built according to these geometrical patterns and rules. And they had never heard of it. And these are biologists that they have a PhD in biology. And I talked to my sister about it, and she has done some art classes, and she knew about sacred geometry.
Wow.
So to me, this was very revealing.
Right?
Like you say, the science alone is not going to cut it either. There
Right?
has to be this.
This
You
marriage.
have to take it from both sides and
Yes.
find the balance. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
So I'm still I'm actually I'm currently taking a break from science for a little while. Well, maybe not so much from science. I'm taking a break from academia. Let's put it that way. Because one of the things that has frustrated me increasingly over the years is no matter how interested I am in science, the way I have to do that science and the way I have to act as a scientist, it's just I just don't feel comfortable with it anymore. It's really become a very competitive environment where it's all about publications. How many publications do you have? Uh, Nobody really cares what the publications are about or what kind
Right,
of
right.
quality they are.
Quantity versus quality, really, it sounds
Exactly.
like.
Yeah. So yeah, I've just become increasingly uncomfortable. I've already been very lucky that I've mostly worked as an independent scientist, also
Yeah,
by choice, partly because of those reasons.
yeah.
But still, I'm in an academic environment. I have to work under those constraints. And yeah, this year I just kind of like I said, okay, I'm tired of it. I need a break.
Yeah, well, and I think
So,
I hear the energy of alignment. It's for right now. There's a lack of alignment in that, and I think that's also part of 2020. I talk a lot about clear soul sight, but what's not aligned is falling away in all of our lives. This has been the in a way the blessing of 2020 and all the world and global events has sort of removed some things from our lives that were not a match, or if nothing else, that brought certain things under the deeper lens of clarity and scrutiny in a way. And I think you're not alone in what you described as maybe something that was even partially fulfilling. We can really feel there's a pulse of something else. Look at being a scientist in the Avatar movie, whatever those people were that, lived on the Earth side that were trying to move in and take over that whole world, right? That kind of science is a whole different kind of science than if you were a scientist in Pandora, totally different experience. And I think we've been as a culture, as a humanity, we've been creating, many people talk about this, just because we can technologically. We haven't really looked at the ethics of that or the spirituality of that. Just because we can, it doesn't mean we should.
yeah,
And that search for meaning, there's an emptiness when you don't have the balance. There's an emptiness when the beauty's not in the research, right? When the art's not in the, or the spirituality's not in the research, there is a void. And it's just like conception, like conceiving a child, conceiving a new being. You can have all the sperm you want, but if you don't have the egg, nothing's going to happen. Right? And
yeah,
there is this, like, we must have both. We must have both to give life to things. And I think we're starting to see the lack. I use this metaphor, or the guides do, and then in my messages, but there seems to be a more evident lack of oxygen in a way, in the world as we knew it, the way we were just going through the patterning. You grow up, you go to school, you get this degree, you go on, maybe you get another degree or you get a trade, you marry, you have a mortgage, you have kids, and that program, the program for what life is supposed to look like, there's not enough of an engine, there's not enough of a fuel source anymore for that to be meaningful enough, especially with the mounds of debt people are facing increasingly to get more of that education. So it's like a treadmill of an experience.
yeah,
And I think maybe 2020 is just the year for people to say, I'm out. Like, I'm out of the game, right? And I'm not quite sure what lies ahead, but I'm going to listen, and I'm going to listen for the alignment, and I'm going to
yeah.
see where I feel moved and guided, to explore or to use my gifts in a different way.
Yeah, that's kind of exactly what I'm going through right now. I really have no clue yet what I'm going to do next.
Yeah.
I may go back into science. I'm not excluding that. I may do something very different. I mean, I'd love to do something with my photography. Right now I'm just doing it as a hobby, and I
Yes.
enjoy doing it. It gives me a lot of pleasure, and people that I occasionally send some things to, they usually have positive comments and everything. But I really have no clue. Yeah, I think it's probably not a coincidence that this is happening right now. That this is the time to do these things and kind of reevaluate and
Yeah.
try to find out where do you really align in that sense. And like you say, that sense of meaning, that's exactly what I've noticed in academia. That sense of meaning is just not there anymore. Um,
Yeah.
and not that I want to say anything bad about my colleagues, but in general, I just noticed that most people in science at this point, it's just a job.
Yes.
It's just a way of making a living. I,
Yes.
I'm not really seeing. Of course, there are exceptions, but in general, I'm not really seeing people doing science because they're really interested in these big questions. Yeah, it's just you end up in science and then you do it for the rest of your life because that's the only thing you know how to do.
Right. Right. And then I don't know, somebody somewhere is probably students or other people are kind of required to read the research. Like it becomes this, it's an engine, but it's like flat. It just doesn't have life force in a way.
Yeah.
And I think many of us are waking up to say, I don't know, that's not where the prana is. That's not where the zest of life is. It is in creation, which you were saying is the sacred geometry found in nature. It's in that creation of life. And I think we've gotten so far away from, valuing that as humanity because we've been conditioned and trained the only way to get ahead is to tuck your head down and plow through and go through the motions and collect the check and maybe hopefully have a pension. Even those are falling away more and more now, some kind of security for the rest of your lives. And I think, I've said this in many ways, I think in some of my video messages, I guess, but the only way the dream of separation lives is if we all believe in it. And when we don't believe in it, we will create something different. And 2020, I don't know a whole lot about numerology. I'm just beginning to learn a little bit more, but I know the 2020 that you add the 2 plus 0 and 2 plus 0 and you get a 4, right? And 4 in numerology is all about building and retemplating and architecture. So we're setting the foundation, we're building the template in 2020. It is a hugely cosmologically transformational year. It's a foundational year, and it's been an amazing, the silver lining is that we've been given the opportunity to take a good long look at the lives we're living and really evaluate from maybe at multidimensional levels, mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally, is this the life I want to be living?
Mhm.
And but when I look at that 2020, and then there's the zeros in the 2020, and those to me are like portals. So you have the build into the portal and into the new energies that we are creating. We are manifesting that now. And some people have been able to work from home during all this COVID stuff happening on the planet. And a lot of those people, I've noticed them saying, even if work opens back up, I realize like I have so much more time to myself because I'm not commuting. I don't have that 2-hour commute anymore. And I'm not racing the kids all around all over the place. And we're saving in gas and we're saving so much money in in all these other ways that I do see people, even if they're not what we would call awake, they're aware that there has been a positive impact even in something that has also been devastating for a lot of families and people. But I always, whenever there's been a challenge in my life, there's always been an incredible blessing. It's like if I can go in and retrieve the lesson, if I can see the gift, then whatever the challenge was tends to release. It's like the challenge's purpose is to expand me, is to help me to see a different way. And I can relate that to, I was talking about chigger bites or spider bites. Like I tend to be allergic to those things. And this year it was particularly bad with the spiders and the bugs where I live. The little biting creatures. And but I said to myself, this year, every spring and every fall it's a little bit worse because they're kind of blooming and procreating, and there's more of them than ever. And then every winter, like the spiders are looking for a nice little place to nestle inside the home. And I really felt myself aware of 2020 saying, I know I have this allergy to their bites. I know that, but I have this awareness throughout the whole year. I can do this differently. And I would talk to the spiders and I would be kind of asking spirit, like, what's the message? I'm almost 50. So for 50 years, I've been dealing with this kind of allergy, right? And the visits that always happen and the bites that I get. And, but I really have found my way to be incredibly more neutral about it than I've ever been in my life. It's that the spiders and I are coexisting, and I feel like I'm learning the message of their gifts, of their medicine, if you if you say that, of their poison in a way, right? But they have been trying to deliver a message, and for all of us, when something isn't clearing or something, you're trusting, you've let go of something that was the promise of security, whatever your job was. There's a lesson in that. There might be a little bit of a challenge in that. Maybe there's some relief in that, but there's also like an incredible gift in that. And a lot of people go through their lives because they don't have the meaning. They don't know that it's a living conscious universe. And it just feels like an empty experience of like, one source of bad luck, one experience of misfortune after another, and that's just the way life goes. I over time and now learning more and more that I am a conscious creator, and I've even learned deeper levels of that, and this is a big level for me to go to like really make peace and like offer my hand in gratitude to the spider. There's something about that to say thank you, because it persists. What we don't understand yet will persist in our lives.
Mm.
And so the spiders have always come, and I'll be curious in 2021 as we move through this fall and then they surface again in the spring. Will I have a different experience with the spiders? I'm really curious to know, because I've come to another level of gratitude and neutrality about it all, and when you find this place of neutrality, the things that were bugging you, you know disappear, because you're not a match for that medicine anymore. You're not a
Mm.
match for that message. You've opened to something else. So we'll have to podcast again maybe in
Yeah.
the spring of 2021 and see where we both are. Like, where did your journey take you? Where did your explorations take you? And where has nature, where are they communicating with me at that point? But the openness. So if 2020 has the two twos that add to a four, that's the building. We have to have the openness, that sense of an inner portal inside ourselves, that we know we're on a journey and there's something new that we're stepping through. We're stepping through that new sphere of experience, and those new timelines and a new cycle. And that's so liberating. Do you feel more liberated or do you feel challenged? Is it a mixture of both?
No, I mean, actually, to be honest, I'm used to this. As I said, I've mostly worked as an independent scientist, and when I finished my PhD, I really so that's when I also had started doing all this traveling and outdoor stuff and the connection with nature. At that point, I really decided that I wanted to see more of the world, and I just wanted to travel and live in different places. So I thought, okay, maybe I can use my work to do that. So from that time on, I have always deliberately looked for short-term projects in different places, and I've literally gone all around the world and lived in many different countries and worked in many different institutes and universities and other places. Um, so I've always had this kind of uncertainty that I
Mm-hmm.
had to deal with, because
Yeah.
very often these jobs, they were just 6 months or 12 months, and then I had to look for something else again. But this was by choice. This was what I wanted. And sometimes I would just take 3 months or 6 months in between and just go traveling somewhere. And somehow it always worked out. So that's also why now I just said, okay, I'm just going to finish everything I'm still working on, and not start anything new. Give myself some time and just see where it goes.
Mm.
Um, yeah, so I'm not anxious about it. I'm not worried about it. Again, this is how I've done things for many years now, and
Yeah.
something will come up somehow. Uh, it always has so far.
Well, and when you were talking, I felt the energy. I don't know if you would say this captures it, but there was an energy I felt of impermanence, like the blessing of impermanence. Like, so many people are looking for the permanent contract so that they know they're always going to have the income they need. And I have to say, my background, even as a child, both my parents worked in larger systems, one in government and one in education. And so my upbringing was not entrepreneurship. It was a box and a package and security, and the things that make life good are in these boxes, right? And
But
somehow
that's
that's
exactly how I grew up as well. It's
right
not something that I got from my upbringing. It's just somehow, again, it's
inside.
probably just something I had in me already, and I just needed the right opportunity to let it come out.
Yeah, right. And the thing you're illustrating in this podcast so well, though, is the listening, is the ability to listen for what's right for you, what's calling to you, what the next experience wants to be. At some level, you've been finely tuning that process, even if that wasn't your modeling, right? Even if that wasn't what you saw growing up, there's this instinct. And I think ultimately, some of the messages that I've received, some of my best messages have been that source is our source. Source is our source. God is our source, the creator or the living universe, the great mystery, whatever anybody wants to call that energy, right? That is the divine design. Um, that is our source. And in this kind of the illusions that we live, it's like this contract will be our security. This relationship will be our security. This thing that I'm going to purchase or whatever is going to be the thing that, makes my life and completes me and fixes everything. And the truth is I do think we're meant to be in that flow, that steady flow of life's creation. And we see it modeled every day with the rising sun and the setting sun. Like every day is truly a new creation. And we are creators in that creation. And yet the cubicles and the contracts and all those things seem to put us in a box.
They
And you know
kill
what
off the
happens?
creativity.
Say that again.
They kill off the creativity.
I was just going to say that. And when we step into the box, our physical body fills the box and there's no room for the creative spirit. There's just no room. We've already filled it up with our presence in that way. Yeah. That's why I think people love to read authors or go to hear speakers or attend workshops or whatever it is that people do, because we not only might enjoy the messenger, their experiences or whatever they're teaching and talking about, but we also like to see somebody in their passion. And then when you talk about academia, or I can talk about teachers at the high school level, I can say in my kids' school, there are teachers who get a paycheck and there are teachers who are very passionate about what they do, and their whole personality and everything that they love is in what they teach. And it's quite a contrast. I mean, you can absolutely see the teachers that love engaging the students and stretching them and inviting them into their own power and their own creativity. And the ones that put everybody to sleep, that everybody's just putting in their time on the Zoom call right now during COVID, and everybody's just trying to get through it, right?
Yeah.
So, that is kind of a metaphor, I guess, for what's going on in our world. And I think for me, more and more, I've learned and I've been able to, I can now say, I choose expansion. Like I choose freedom. I choose liberation. And my partner worked for the federal government for many years. And we made the conscious choice because we could feel her world, maybe like what you describe in academia, but in her world as a clinical psychologist in a prison system, it was getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And some of the creative projects that she had been able to do to keep her engaged, right, while she did perform the required duties, they were getting choked out. More and more things she had to do in less and less time. There's something that you can see the box closing in, and we were watching that and saying, gosh, that's a huge squeeze. The squeeze is on. But that feeling inside, what did we do? She listened. She admitted to herself that the life force was changing. It was going out of the work she was doing there. And we made the conscious decision to take that leap, and we had kids and college and lots of things that you might say, oh, I can't do this because of this. I can't explore that because I have all these responsibilities. When we say yes to the portal that's right for us, that alignment, when we line up with what is ours to do, a million other, solutions or opportunities find us that we couldn't see because we didn't step into the portal. We didn't step through that doorway. And so you probably do have a lot of colleagues, just like my partner still has a lot of colleagues that are still working where she once was. Um, and it's like we're on two different timelines completely, because they're in a whole different world now trying to juggle what's gotten even smaller. and
Yeah.
smaller, right? And how much can we constrict as a humanity? How small can we get? I don't even know that I want to know the answer. Right?
Yeah, I don't want to go there either.
Right. Right?
Definitely not. Yeah.
You know?
No, I certainly see that in academia all over the place. And this year it's been even worse with the whole COVID thing because now everybody has jumped on it. Again, it's all about publications these days.
Yeah.
And I keep thinking for a lot of my colleagues, the COVID thing has actually been a blessing because now suddenly they all start publishing papers on COVID, on doing data analysis and looking at psychological impact of the lockdowns and you name it, somebody will write a paper about it.
I'm sure, right? Exactly.
I've
And yet,
I've completely stayed away from that.
yeah, and it's a blessing. It's like some of us know there's a door. There's that option, and then there's all these other options. And I think I'm going to choose one of those. I think something really happens when we say yes to our spirit and we say no to, I don't know that it's compliance, but we say no to the system to the source that we think is our safety, which is our
Yeah,
job. That
yeah,
external sense of like that thing outside of me is what keeps my life on track. I remember Sonia Choquette. She was a big speaker. She's an author. She's an intuitive, but she talks about if we don't cultivate a space inside for our spirit, she actually says it leaves. It leaves. And so she said, I have people all the time, I think, that came to her for readings, and their spirit would be floating way out here because it didn't have any interest in being inside their bodies because of the boxes they were living in. And I think that's the way our spirit, our higher selves find a way of being somewhat higher vibrational while we're having a lower vibrational experience. And that made a big impression on me of like,
mm,
wow, at a time that I was really challenged in my life, I thought, I think there's a lot of truth to what she's saying. And I probably have to find ways to nurture that more, even though I'm in a really challenging situation. Um, there's always a way to nurture ourselves. There's always a way to find some expansion. And some people find that literally in the breath, in like a yoga class or meditation or walks in nature, hiking like you found it. I found it in writing and creating and posting things. I think that's profound. And I think anyone listening to this, whether you're like, oh, yeah, I nurture my spirit every day, I'm totally a nature person, I totally relate to what you guys are saying. And then I also know there are people that listen to this are like, I just don't connect with that. I can't find that joy. Like I know that that's what I should be thinking, but I just every time I have a little bit of hope, something happens, and then I think this is all there is. Like, I want to believe that something better is inside me and out there, but I'm just not seeing it right now. And and to those people, I want to pose that question to you. And I would just say to those people, that's when you have to remember that you're the creator. Like you're the author. And you're not fixing it for everyone else. When you get right and aligned with yourself, it adds that frequency to the entire collective and it does raise the consciousness here. But there is something inside us to like, what's going to give you the spa, like that inner sacred space, that inner creationary space? What is yours to create today? And you seem to create it. Well, go ahead and answer that question. What would you say to those people in despair, or just can't find a happy thought?
yeah. I don't know if I have the answer to that.
Right? It's $1 million question.
Yeah, in some sense, I still feel very lucky that certain things just seem to have happened in my life that have put me on that track. But then at the same time, I'm thinking that probably was no coincidence either.
Mhm.
Uh, but still, you have to make a choice. I, I I had the opportunity, for example, to move to Santa Fe and live there for many years and really enjoy the beautiful scenery there. But it was going from Europe to the US, away from my family,
Mhm.
giving up a lot of other things, friends that I had that I couldn't see anymore, especially around that time when I left because the internet was
Oh, yeah.
barely existed even. Um, so yeah, in the end, it's you who has to make the choice and who has to make that first step. And I think if you have the courage to do that, then the rest will follow.
Yes. That's the hero's journey. I mean, that really is the hero's journey.
It is, yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And you're the hero of your own story. I mean, that's the truth of these times. And I think the best way I can say is what has happened in my life, and I think I'm hearing it in yours, is that we said yes. At a certain level, we felt this inner call of something, whatever it was, a nudge, or like, even if it was, this isn't working. So there was a calling to something different, right? We said yes. I've said yes to so many things in my life, and I didn't know how it was going to go. I didn't know what I was saying yes to and what the next
exactly.
steps are. My partner in her work as a life coach and a psychologist calls it the stones in the fog. That you're trusting that your next step is there, and you can't see the next stones in the fog, but you take the next step. And
Yeah,
then as you take that next step, the next stone in front of you becomes clearer. And I use the words breadcrumbs, like we're following these breadcrumbs in our lives
yeah.
and
Just take it
saying
one step at a
yes.
time. Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing that I've also learned is everything is a trade-off. Again, like I said, I moved far away. I had to leave certain things behind, but I gained a lot of other things. And every time I did that, every 6 or 12 months that I moved somewhere else, I had to give up certain things. And most of the time things worked out, and maybe once or twice it didn't work out so well. But even then, one thing I've learned is that it's all a trade-off. You give up certain things, you get back other things, but there's no point in having a regret.
Mm.
If you look back at things with regret, then you know that's only going to keep you from making the next choice and the next step. Even if things don't always work out, there's something you can learn from it, and you just move on to the next thing.
So well said.
Well, I mean, it sounds easy, but
You know, but it
uh,
does get easier once you get a little bit
it,
more practice. These are like,
yep,
courage muscles or spiritual fortitude, muscles.
exactly. Yeah,
And
yeah. I
once
mean,
you
for me,
started,
it was new as well. I had never, I'd always lived in the Netherlands, and never even thought about going abroad. But I somehow I just did it, and yeah, things get easier the more you do it. You get used to it, and you know how to cope, and how to adjust to it.
yes, it's like curiosity and inspiration or whatever that energy is that moves inside all of us. I like to use the word curiosity because you can just be really curious about yourself and your life, and that leads you forward. But that's a way of saying yes. And
Yep.
yes is like a magic wand in your life that opens up all of these experiences. And regret is a no. Regret is a no energy. So when you stay and you wallow or you just occupy that space of regret, you're not pulling out your magic wand very easily to say yes to the next opportunity. You're more inclined because you're already practicing the no. The regret is like, but it could be the wrong decision.
Yep.
And right. And there's like a stagnancy to that happens in a lot of people's lives too, where some people just don't ever make a decision. And that is a decision, but that's not a yes. That's just going along and having the river take you instead of you being the creator of your experience. Yeah. Yeah. And that's how our world is sometimes, right? Like that's how we're talking about. Some people will stay in those jobs. I like to call jobs that we don't feel particular passions for as bridges. It's a bridge energy. It's a bridge that you're in. If you know right now, let's just say, oh yeah, I'm in that. I'm in
Hmm.
that. I'm in that. That's the space I'm occupying right now. You can actually just let yourself know, I'm on the bridge, I'm moving across that bridge, and I'm listening for where the universe and that magic wand inside me is creating a yes. Whatever is aligned for me, I'm going to know that. I'm going to know what is meant for me. And I'm sure it sounds like for you, there were all these experiences where you might have even had two job opportunities maybe at once. I don't know, but you were like, do I want to be in Germany or do I want to be in, Thailand? If you always know that the universe, in the best conspiracy there is, that the universe is conspiring to give you the best experience while you're in physical form and to line up highest good for you, then your job is to stay open, keep those portals open, know that you're a templater, that you're a creator, and that yes energy attracts way more opportunities than the negative self-talk that we engage sometimes, that, well, that might work for them, but it wouldn't work for me. the universal principles are universal. They're for all of us. And all of us have to dip our toes in the water sometime of like taking that positive leap, taking that positive risk and saying yes to something. And that's where you and I can speak from experience because we did say yes at a certain point. You were in the Netherlands and you said yes to the school. And that opened up many other doors that, that might not
That I
otherwise
didn't,
open.
yeah, I didn't even know that those other doors existed
Right. Exactly.
until after I made that step.
That's exactly right. Well,
Yeah.
I want to ask you maybe as we close this out, like where's maybe your favorite place in the world? Do you have a favorite or is that hard to say?
It is hard to say because every place has its own kind of unique things, and again, it mostly depends on your own attitude, how you're going to go there and how you're going to experience it. Um, so in general, it's hard to say, but uh, there are a couple of places that I've always thought these are. If I ever wanted to settle down, there are a couple of places on my list that I would consider, and one of them is definitely still New Mexico.
Wow. Awesome.
It's still an amazing place, and I would be very happy to go back there. Another one is New Zealand,
Yeah.
which is also just an amazing country. Um, and I actually, when I was there, I spent about a year in New Zealand, and I did actually consider applying for residency, permanent residency there.
Wow.
The main reason I ended up not doing it is because I also knew I wanted to continue traveling and see more of the world, and then having New Zealand as a home base is a little bit, yeah, less convenient. Let's put it that way. It's kind of
Yes.
far away from everything.
Yes.
Uh, but yeah, so there are definitely a couple of places that I would consider in that sense. Yeah.
Yeah, and is it for you? I find it interesting oftentimes, not to, set up a polarity here, but I think there's often people who love the mountains or love the ocean. Do you love both environments equally, or do you feel more called to hiking and mountaineering in some way?
Yeah, I'm definitely a mountain person.
Yeah, yeah,
I mean, I'm not saying that I don't like the ocean, but yeah, if I have to make a choice, for me, it would definitely be mountains.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And are there mountains in New Zealand? I don't
Oh
know
yeah,
much
yeah,
about.
yeah,
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 yeah. Yeah, it's beautiful. I've connected with a number of people in New Zealand and Australia. It's quite a time difference. I would say for like Zoom calls, it is amazing. But the people that live there, do love it. And I've heard it's one of the most gorgeous places to
yeah. It
be.
is. Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, the Netherlands is one of the most densely populated countries in the world, but New Zealand, of course, is very sparsely populated. So
Wow.
they have
Wow.
more they have more sheep than people. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And the good thing there also is that people are aware of it. They are doing very well in terms of nature conservation,
Yeah.
and of course it is easier when you have a sparse population.
Yes.
Um, but what struck me there was that people are really aware of it. So that's a very good thing.
Yeah. Well, you're amazing. I love connecting with you. I Can you share with our audience what's your website where they can find you and Twitter?
Yeah, so my website is worldwidewanderings.net. Um, and my Twitter is Wandering Wim.
I love that.
Uh, So yeah, those are the kind of the my website has links to all the other things that I have
Oh,
as
good,
well,
good.
like my pictures and my writings and everything.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. A lot of
worldwidewanderings.net.
worldwidewanderings.net. And I like that energy of wandering women. They say not all who wander are lost.
I have
So
a T-shirt with that saying.
yes, right? And it's true, right? Actually,
Yeah,
I think you're like living your spirit. You're actually found in the wandering, right? You're in your presence. You're in that amazing space where everything happens, where creation happens. I think, some could say that it does happen in the wandering. It happens in the willingness to be open and to not know, to have the don't know mind, but know that creation is happening in every moment. That's the magic of our time. That's the magic of
yeah,
who we are. Yeah, really.
absolutely.
Well, thank you for joining me today.
Thank
And
you again for the invitation.
Yes, yes, and definitely. I think we'll have more conversations to come. I'll be curious to see where you wander next, and people can find us at Whole Soul Mastery on YouTube, and you can also find these videos at Color the Magic on YouTube. And I'm also I'm starting to branch out, and I'll have this in the description section below. But I'm expanding to Rumble.com and Parlor and brand new Tube and Gab and a couple of other places. So just keep searching for Whole Soul Mastery and we'll pop up. And fabulous conversations like these can find you and inspire you and provide some of that soul sustenance we're talking about in these times. Nourishing the soul and creating that meaning is, I think, something we're all looking for. So thank you. And until next time, blessings. Namaste. Thanks, Wim.